Good evening, everybody. Welcome in to Live and Learn. Hope you're doing well on this Wednesday, March the 5th. Plan to go live tomorrow night, but we're live tonight because there's so much to talk about. In the NFL, we got a UFC pay-per-view this weekend, a massive injury in the NBA that has ramifications short-term, long-term for the future of the Dallas Mavericks franchise that are interesting. And of course, the NHL with the trade deadline looming, less than 48 hours until we get there. 4 o'clock Atlantic on Friday. Then rosters are set. Teams cannot get any better. We know where everybody stands going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So much to dive into. I want to start the show by actually discussing the New Jersey Devils, who lost to the Dallas Stars last night on the road. Thomas Harley scored the game-winning goal with 5 seconds remaining. And New Jersey is in a state of freefall. They are hanging on to the third spot in the Metropolitan Division. They can't seem to win a game. They have got Jacob Markstrom back, but even with that, they haven't found much success. Sheldon Keefe got ejected from a game for being upset with the officials and then got fined $25,000 by the NHL today for conduct unbecoming to the league. And they also learned today that their best player, one of the best young players in the NHL, Jack Hughes, who got injured this past weekend, falling hard into the end boards, will miss the remainder of the season and needs shoulder surgery. Jack Hughes has gotten injured a lot. Unfortunately for him, he is injury prone. He's not the biggest guy. He's a small player. We see his brother Quinn, who's currently injured and will be out of the lineup tonight for the Vancouver Canucks. New Jersey has Hischier, great start. Has Jack Hughes. Luke Hughes is now an NHL player. They add Jacob Markstrom. I loved everything they did. They bring on Sheldon Keefe, who he's not an elite coach, but I said for him, he's walking into a great situation with a great roster that can compete for a Stanley Cup right now. But whoever people get at the deadline, we'll talk about some trades. This move for New Jersey, this news is a season ender. It's a destroyer of their season. If they make the playoffs, and I don't think it's a given anymore, with the likes of Columbus lurking and a bunch of teams not far behind the New Jersey Devils, if they make the playoffs, they will be a one and done. If they make the playoffs, it will be 7 games or less for them. And they're spending a lot of money to get deeper into the playoffs. Sure, they missed last year, but that was a colossal failure. They fired Lindy Ruff. They made moves to try to prevent that from happening. And the thought could be, well, you got cap space. We can just go replace Jack Hughes. Not going to happen. There's nobody to trade for. There's no replacing a player like Jack Hughes. They didn't really release a statement, and they don't really have to. To me, it's deflating. (2019-2020) 61 games. 2020-2021 56. 22-23, 78, career high. 23-24, 62. 20-24, 20-25, 62. He's always banged up. He's never available for a full season. And some of that is just his build. Some of it is not his fault. It's just the game. Not to mention Dougie Hamilton left last night's game for the Devils. They have gotten a shit sandwich of news over the last couple days about where their team is and where their team is going. Sheldon Keefe is beyond frustrated with this team. They are in a tricky situation. I think they're good enough to make the playoffs even without Jack Hughes. I don't think it's a given. I don't think it's an easy task. But can they? Yes. Part of it is accepting that they're going to have to deal with a tricky situation. If you look, Jets on Friday, tough game. Flyers, Blue Jackets, Oilers, Penguins, Blue Jackets, Flames, Senators, Canucks. They play a lot of playoff teams down the stretch. They're going to need Markstrom to be great. He's capable of doing that. But I don't believe this is a hot take. I don't believe this is hyperbole. The Devils' season is finished. Finished. Dawson Mercer, gonna have to play a lot more minutes. Gonna have to be a lot more effective. Palat, have a pulse. Hasn't really had one since he joined New Jersey. Tatar is going to be playing on the second line of this team. That's not great for anybody. This team needs to make the playoffs, and not just because it's a feel-good thing. They have a good enough roster. They spent a lot of money. If they can add before the trade deadline, they should. Because you're not just thinking about this year, you're thinking about the future, whether that's Scott Lawton, whether that's player X. New Jersey is an aggressive team. New Jersey typically are active. They should be. I feel bad for Jack Hughes. He's a great player. His family is so entertaining to watch. The Kachucks, the Hugheses, some great American players. Unfortunately, and Quinn is similar, and Quinn's awesome. And Quinn's better than his brother, which is hard to do because Jack's a stud. They can't seem to stay healthy. And it's a tough, tough pill to swallow. It's brutal. But I think you have to start the show with that because it's the biggest news of the day. There's trades. We're going to talk about them. This is bigger. Jack Hughes is a superstar in the NHL. Superstar player. No player that's been traded so far coming to deadline week is a superstar or likely will be a superstar because I don't think Mikko Rantanen is going to get traded again. Brutal for the Devils. Brutal. But hockey's a fickle bitch. Just like life. And they got to take it on the chin and move on. Okay. Tampa Bay Lightning. At one point, went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, won back-to-back Stanley Cups, had a Hart Trophy winner, Nikita Kucherov, had the best goaltender in the world, and Andrei Vasilevsky. Then went through a bit of a rut. Not a huge rut where you miss the playoffs. That wouldn't happen to an organization like Tampa, but you make some bad trades that I actually thought was good at the time, and I'll take it on the chin. Trading for Tanner Jeannot, big flop, big swing and a miss. You have the embarrassment of being the only team of losing to Toronto in the first round over the last, 20 years, so that sucks. You had to take that on the chin. But after a slow start, since the start of 2025, Tampa's been one of the best teams in the league. Andrei Vasilevsky has won 10 of his last 11 starts, allowing 3 goals or less. Jake Gensel, the replacement for Steven Stamkos, is up to 32 goals. Steven Stamkos got a point last night for the first time in 14. Kucherov is third in league scoring. Braden Point has the most power play goals in the league. Victor Hedman in mid-30s is still playing at an elite level. Do I have to keep going? This team is competitive. This team, whether they finish first, second, or third in the Atlantic Division, believe that they can compete for a Stanley Cup this year. I don't think they're crazy. When I say this, it's unlikely, but it's unlikely for every team. It's so hard to win. The margins are so small. So it's unlikely for Toronto, for Tampa, for Florida, for anybody to win. To understand that when I put that in. But Julien Brisebois, since taking over for Steve Yzerman, has done a really great job. And today they pulled off a trade, bringing some familiarity back to Tampa Bay, back to St. Pete's. Tampa acquired Yanni Gourde, Stanley Cup champion, former member of the Lightning, and Oliver Bjorkstrand, Danish winger, for a 2026 first rounder, a 2027 first rounder, both top 10 protected, by the way, a 2025 second, which belongs to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and young player Mikey Eyssimont, all going back to Seattle. Yanni Gourde returned for the first time in over 2 months last night for Seattle, playing against Minnesota in a loss. But I watched some of that game. He looked pretty good, moved well, throwing checks, doing Yanni Gourde things. Tampa didn't want to lose Yanni Gourde, but they did. He was left exposed during the expansion draft, and of course, Seattle took him. He was asked to be a first, second-line center. He's not. He's a third-line center on a really effective team. He does his role incredibly well. He kills penalties, he checks, he pisses the opponents off. But Seattle, and Ron Francis, I think, is a good GM. I don't think he's been a very good GM in Seattle. Built a team with limited star power, limited game breakers, and Yanni Gourde was put, he was a square peg into a round hole. It's not going to fit. It's not going to work. And despite that year where they got to the second round, it's been largely irrelevant in Seattle. They're not a team people watch. They're not a team people care about. They have a really nice arena. They have a Kraken as a last name. But otherwise, outside of Seattle, nobody watches the Kraken. Nobody cares. Nobody knows who the best player is. Nobody even keeps up with how Shane Wright is doing. He's got 14 goals in the season, by the way. He's having a decent season. But that team doesn't have many qualities that you're stoked about. Not a team that really sparks fear, that get you excited about the future of the league. They are boring. For Tampa Bay, I like it. They are going all in. And I don't mind it. They're a veteran team that's been there before, and they're giving this core of Point, Kucherov, Cirelli, Hagel, Hedman, Gensel, and Vasilevsky the chance to win again. Adding these couple players, Bjorkstrand is a third, possibly a second-line winger. He can score goals. Playing with better players, I think he will score more. You had Yanni Gourde. So now you have options. Yanni Gourde or Nick Paul can play center. Cirelli, Point, up the middle. That's elite stuff. That's really good depth. That's a good team. Good forwards. Glendening, perfect fourth-line center. Mitchell Chaffee, I like him as well. And Gergensons, who's just chew minutes, throw hits, poke check, whatever he needs to do. So for Tampa trying to win, I get it. Because here's the truth. Is it unlikely that they probably even win a first round? Yeah. If they play Florida, they will not be the favorite. Can they beat Florida? Yeah. But Florida can also beat them. They do not play well against Toronto. I've said this forever. Toronto, I don't think, is that upset to play Tampa in a playoff series. They have their number. They like their style. They match up well. They can score goals on Vasilevsky like few can. So that's a good thing for Leafs Nation. But they're also a team that can win. Could they go on a run? Yeah, why not? They could be dangerous. They could have some success. 100%. And adding a couple depth players to a team that's already very competitive, that you could argue has the best coach in the NHL, just the ultimate winner, whether it's Stanley Cups or it's at the Four Nations. John Cooper is the truth. If they don't do this and they let years go by and they don't add, Tampa's going to fade. And whether John Cooper's a great coach or not, which he is, they'll likely fire him in a year and a half. And that might sound crazy to you. It's not. He's been the coach there for 12 years. You know how rare that is? 12 years? Could he be a Babcock where he's in Detroit for over 20? Maybe. And he'd be the guy to do it. But eventually it gets stale. It got stale with Quenneville in Chicago. They fired him. Cooper would get hired to second. He'd go to a good team, have success. But it happens. The team they had wasn't going to win a cup, in my mind. I still, like every team in the league, I'd love for Tampa to go acquire another depth defenseman. Because they have this Lilleberg and they have J.J. Moser, who I think are going to play far too many minutes for my liking. Far too many minutes. But they trust them. They know their prospects. But I wouldn't want to play them 20-plus minutes a night. That's just me. So I'd love for them to look and go like, oh, we've had David Savard before. Maybe we'll go trade for David Savard. I think that would be great for Tampa. Whether they will, whether they can, do they have the assets? It's tricky. But they made their team better. They bring in a guy who knows what he's walking into. That is a great competitor in Yanni Gourde. Aller Bjorkstrand is a goal scorer when he's with good players. Can shoot the puck, can forecheck. He's been in the league a long time for a reason. He's not afraid. I like him, personally. So I like it for Tampa. For Seattle, they get 2 top 10 protected first-round picks for 2 players that are not second-line players, one could argue. They need an influx of talent. And you can't say it's going to be great, because anybody that says that to you is lying. Like on TV on Friday, that's why I give you the straight dope here on Live and Learn, because it's about living and learning. I thought this when I was a kid, when I was a Leaf, before I became the independent journalist, the number one voice of being just objective and cutting the bullshit. Before I was the person that I am now, a far superior person to when I was a fan trying to analyze this. No offense to the fans out there, but I'm better. You see a couple first rounders and you squeal like a pig in shit because you're so excited. Oh, we got first round picks. My thought about that is, do you trust the person making those picks? Because if you don't, that first round pick is irrelevant. If it's the Fergler, John Ferguson Jr., like he was when I was a Maple Leafs fan and I was excited, I shouldn't have been, because he would have drafted idiots and bad players. Now, if I was, honestly, even though I think he's done a bad job team building, if it was Steve Yzerman when it comes to drafting, I'd be cool. Because Simon Edvinson's a good player. And I like Marco Kasper. And Lucas Raymond was a good draft pick. He's made some good selections. Shane Wright, he's been okay. I like having first-round picks. And I think it's great for Seattle to have an influx of talent because they are not very talented. They work hard. Great. That's not going to win you much. Work ethic with skill will win you things. Get you closer to the ultimate goal. Just working hard, yeah, you'll be where you are forever. They get 3 draft picks in the first 2 rounds. First and 26, first and 27, a second in this year's draft. For those 2 players that, like I just said, are not, you could maybe argue Bjorkstrand, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. For Gourde and Bjorkstrand, likely third-line players. You are not going to do any better than getting 2 firsts, a second, and Mikey Eyssimont, who I actually like, who will play for that team tomorrow. He's 28. He's been around. A lot of time in the American League, played at St. Cloud State, played for the Winnipeg Jets for 20 games, played for the San Jose Sharks for 20. Not a huge point producer. Good skater. Scored a goal Last night, yeah, Tuesday. Scored a goal last night, then gets traded today. So basically what the reaction to draft picks is you don't know this is going to change your future yet because you can't predict the future. But based on acquiring stuff for two guys that aren't above a third liner, you're not going to do any better than this. Tampa gave up a lot. A lot. And yet I don't hate it for them because I see where they're coming from on this deal. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to prolong their window. They're trying to win a third cup, a fourth appearance in this era. The last 4 years, presidential cycle, the entire time Biden was in office, a team from Florida represented the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup final. It's a fact, by the way. The entire time. He doesn't remember it, but it happened. Didn't win every year, but they represented the East. You'd be hard-pressed to say that a team from Florida doesn't have as good a chance as anybody to get back to the Stanley Cup final again. And that's whether that's the defending Stanley Cup champions or whether that's the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa got better today with this trade. Seattle might have got better in the future. We don't know that yet. It's irresponsible to say they did because we don't know who they're drafting. They could have drafted Alexander Dag. So I'm not going to be one to say that. What I will say, they did very good for acquiring 2 third-line players. Good job, Ron Francis. Interesting deal. I don't hate it, either side. But if people on TV over the next 2 days say Seattle changed their franchise, it's such a game changer for them, they don't know it. It's a lie. Because you don't know who you're drafting. Draft picks. Who gives a shit if the draft pick sucks? If it's Aki Berg, then I don't want the draft. I'd rather have Yanni Gordon, Oliver Bergeron, because I know they can play in the league, and I know they can help me this year. And that is exactly what Tampa is thinking. Interesting move. Also today, the Florida Panthers acquired Vitek Vanacek from the San Jose Sharks for American Hockey League player Patrick Giles. Vanacek was a former member of the Devils. He's in the last year of his deal. He makes $3.4 million. Florida traded Spencer Knight to get Seth Jones. They needed a new backup goaltender, and they get one in Vanacek. They had the cap space with the Matthew Tkachuk LTIR replacement. Giles has 39 points in 39 games in the American Hockey League this year. He played college hockey at BC. He's played 4 full seasons in the American League. So far, he's 25. So we'll see what he could be for San Jose, a rebuilding team. Florida, they know they got Bobrovsky. He's their guy. He's their number one. They will win or lose because of him. Vanacek is insurance. I think he costs far less than, say, a John Gibson in Anaheim. Gibson might be better, But they were getting rid of him. Pending UFA, goalies aren't particularly moved that quickly. San Jose has Georgiev, who's their number one currently, and they have Yaroslav Askarov, who they traded for in the offseason with Nashville. He's played 9 games in the pros this year. I think he should play a ton of games down the stretch because that team's going nowhere. And they're hoping, Mike Greer, the GM, and ownership are hoping they get the number 1 draft pick again. They can pick Matthew Schaefer because they already have a stud in Macklin Celebrini. But if you have Celebrini up front, you have Schaefer on the back end, you're in good shape for years to come. You're a dangerous team with Will Smith and the players that you have at your disposal. You very well could be a team in a couple years that could be in a playoff spot. So that's San Jose's outlook. They had to move a guy. I don't think there's a huge market for Vanacek. You get a player that you hope could be an NHLer. It's a flyer. Florida needed a goalie. Good deal. Didn't cost them anything. Edmonton Oilers. This is a deal from yesterday. Edmonton acquired Trent Frederic and Max Jones from the Boston Bruins for a 2025 second and a 2026 fourth-round pick. Okay. I watched the Oilers last night against the Anaheim Ducks, and they got pumped. They gave up 4 goals on 9 shots, but Fredericton, New Brunswick native Calvin Pickard was not the only problem. Their play in front of him was abysmal. And I think I said this on Monday, but I'm going to reiterate the same point. They look old and they look slow. Teams are skating them out of the building. Connor McDavid had an awesome solo goal. He had a phenomenal pass to set up Leon Draisaitl that was very pretty. But I don't see a team that's very dangerous. They've lost 4 or 5 of the last 6. They beat Carolina, then lose at home, coming off a road trip to the Anaheim Ducks. Jacob Lacombe, who's quietly a good player. Cutter Gauthier both had 3 assists. Mason McTavish, who loves playing in Edmonton. It's where he won the World Junior MVP. He had 2 goals in the first period. Trent Frederic may not play until the postseason starts because he's banged up. So he doesn't help the team right now. Max Jones, I remember seeing Max Jones play in junior, and I thought, God, this guy's going to be a good pro. Had the body, a prototypical power forward. And yet, played for the London Knights, won a Mem Cup with Max Domi and Mitch Marner and Matthew Tkachuk and them boys. And then he's only played 265 NHL games to this point. He's only played in 7 NHL games this season, held pointless. 21 points in 38 AHL games so far this season. So basically, he's an American Hockey League player. He'll likely report to Bakersfield to start. Could he be something? Yes, in a depth role, bring some energy. But it's not great where I watch Oilers games and I go, their best player tonight was Corey Perry. He had the most jump. He had such an effect on the game. And I love Corey Perry. Future Hall of Famer. The Worm. People that hate Corey Perry don't get it. Don't get how effective he is. So while I like that the Oilers made it, I like Trent Frederic, Max Jones, TBD. It doesn't help them now. There's just a stink on this team. A stink of malaise, lazy, shitty goaltending, really bad defending in front of their goalies, a lethargic Connor McDavid. Could be fatigue. He played more hockey last year, to think, the year before they got to the conference final, than they get to the Stanley Cup final last year. He could be tired. I mean, for sure he is. Everybody is. They're banged up. I think he's probably a little banged up currently. A lot of star players aren't playing their best. Austin Matthews isn't playing all that well for the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. McDavid isn't. Jack Hughes is out for the season. Quinn Hughes isn't playing. So lots of elite guys aren't bringing their A game. This is a move. It's a start. I don't think it can be the final move for the Oilers. To bring this into a bigger discussion, I gave my top 10 players available on Monday. And I made it very clear that my list had guys that probably wouldn't be traded. But they're on my list because I think they're really good and they could be moved for the right price. I think the Oilers, if they're not going to acquire a goaltender, and it's hard to do, I'm not saying it isn't, but if they're not going to get one, whether that's John Gibson or whether that's, really thinking big and that's Jordan Binnington, they need a D and they need a D of substance. And they aren't everywhere. But they just made a deal with Boston. Boston, to me, should be wide open for business. That team, they lost to Nashville last night. That's the sign when you know you're not making the playoffs. That's the sign when you know we're not going anywhere. We're old. We had a hell of a run, but we are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Brandon Carlo is a very good defenseman. He's awesome. And I think he'd be great on the Edmonton Oilers. He kills penalties. He's very good defensively. And he's just a simple hockey player. He knows his role. You don't have to ask him to do anything. He just goes out there. He can play big minutes as well. Take care of business. Move on with your life. He's very much a Matthias Ekholm. Now, do you have enough to get him? Because, Boston's not just going to give him away. And the cupboards are a little bit bare in Edmonton. They do not have great prospects. Sam O'Reilly is probably their best prospect, and he's been playing for the London Knights. Matthew Savoy has been playing, pardon me, a couple games at the NHL level. I don't mind him. Decent player. Sam O'Reilly was a first rounder last year. They still have Raphael Lavoie. Bo Akey, a defenseman who played at the World Juniors. So they don't have a lot. But I'd throw a package to, if you could get Brandon Carlo, do it. They need a responsible guy on the back end other than Matthias Ekholm. Klingberg isn't. Kulak isn't. Nurse isn't. Bouchard sure as hell isn't. Ty Emberson, hardly an NHL player. But looking through those guys, Kulak plays big minutes. Kulak shouldn't play big minutes. It's not that great of a player, let's be honest. And Ekholm's numbers look horrible lately because he plays with Evan Bouchard, who's a drain of life. John Klingberg played 18 and a half minutes for the Oilers. I get it, it's in a loss, but still 18 minutes for Klingberg, who hadn't played in the league in almost 2 years. It's not good, guys. Lindgren's gone. He would have been nice. He's in Colorado. Colorado beat you to it. Brandon Carlo, and I thought about it today, he's the guy for me. Because Boston is a team that is going to sell. I don't think anybody is off limits other than Pasternak. You have a deal that you really like? We'll hear you out. We'll give it some thought. Because no other team really has any... Like Pittsburgh, yeah, they suck. Sure, they'll trade guys. I don't want any of their defensemen. I hate their team. I hardly want Raquel because I think he's got the stench of the Pittsburgh AARP on him. Bowen Byram, good player in Buffalo, but he's a young guy. I don't want another one of those guys. Connor Murphy. Connor Murphy's a good replacement. He's playing in Chicago. But he's not as good as Carlo. He won't have as big an impact. He'll play less minutes. So I like it for the Oilers. I do. But I don't think they still need work. To get destroyed by the Anaheim Ducks on home ice on a Tuesday, after you just had a road trip where you got spanked against the Flyers, and you got crushed against the Capitals. Okay, it's a better loss, but it's still a loss. You beat Carolina, but you come home and you lay an egg. They need to do. It's going to be an uphill battle for them to get back to a Stanley Cup final this year. Can they? Yes. Will they? It's tough to say they will. They need to do more. I like the trade. I like Frederic. I think he's going to be a good playoff performer when he's healthy. And you might go, okay, Edmonton, they'll finish behind Vegas. They're comfortable playing LA. That's probably true because they played LA the last 3 years in the first round, and they've beaten them the last 3 years in the first round. I think LA is better than they have been in previous years. I think Vegas, yeah, they lost to Edmonton last year. I think Vegas is a good team. They're playing good hockey at the moment. Their goaltending solid. They have one of the best defense cores in the league. Jack Eichel is playing like an elite player. That's a hard night's work to go into Vegas and win. Beat them 4 out of 7 this year. If you can do that, bully to you. That's not fun. Oilers need to do more. Boston, sell. Sell whatever you can. I'm still of the opinion they should trade Brad Marchand before Friday. I'm not of the opinion anymore that they will. I think a lot of these guys, captains, if you will, I don't think Marchand's going to be moved, and I'm less and less confident that Braden Shen is going to be moved out of St. Louis. They're in Los Angeles tonight. Important game. If St. Louis wins, they're a point out of a playoff spot with 19 games to go. With a lot of veterans in that lineup, including Braden Shen, including Parayko, including Binnington, all Stanley Cup champions, do they want to move off of pieces when they are so close? And the teams above them are Calgary, who very much nobody expected to make the playoffs this year. Vancouver, who are, how do I describe Vancouver? They are erratic. You don't know what you're going to get from them one game to the next. All that being said, why couldn't you make the playoffs? They could. Do I think they could win a cup? No. But maybe making the playoffs is as important to St. Louis as, building for the future. Which different states for different ownerships where making the playoffs, giving that playoff revenue, could be 2 games, could be 3 games, is really important. I don't think Marchand's going to be moved. I don't think Braden Shen is going to be moved, a veteran. And that's why I think Scott Lawton, Flyers, he was on my list. I think he was 7th. Darren Dreger reported today 8+ teams are calling on Scott Lawton. He's a third-line center. But based on the return for Yanni Gourde, and there's not a whole lot of other guys to keep the price down, and a whole bunch of better guys available, I could see Scott Lawton getting a first rounder in return. Very well could happen. Because there's so few players to acquire. Could Boston open up the floodgates and Pavel Zacha be available, or Charlie Coyle? I wouldn't want him, but maybe somebody would become available. Sure. Ricard Raquel in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Lawton's a center. Nice to have, I hear. Important to win, one would think. Also, Brad Marchand is out week to week, so he will not play again before the trade deadline. Sounds like he might not play until mid-March at the earliest. So he's in big trouble. Big trouble for Boston. And losing to Nashville, they waved the white flag. They're done. They are done. They're going nowhere this season. Time to sell off pieces, plan for the future. Other news around the league. Matthew Olivier, arguably the toughest player in the NHL, who is a pending UFA, but he's actually got good hands, can fight people, can score goals. Playing on an upstart Columbus team that's having a fantastic season, currently occupying the first wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. He agreed to a 6-year, $18 million extension today to stay in the state of Ohio. $3 million per year, 28 years old. He bounced around the league. Didn't really have a home. Didn't have a set role. Got to Columbus. And he's been awesome. He's been awesome. I think this is an awesome signing for Columbus. By not trading him, you're not selling. So it keeps you in that mix of, hey, we're competitive. Hey, we're still going to try to make the playoffs. We like our team. We're keeping one of our own in-house, a guy we gave a chance to. He can fight. He defends his teammates. But then you also look at him, as I mentioned, just turned 28. Former Moncton Wildcat, by the way. He's got 12 goals on the season. That's more than he had in his other stops in Nashville and his first 2 seasons in Columbus. More points than he had in either season already. He's got 113 penalty minutes, most in the league. I like him. It's not a crazy number. If something happens, you can trade him. But he's young enough. I think he's getting better. He's a late bloomer. Can he be a 15, 18 goal scorer for the next couple of years for the Columbus Blue Jackets? I think he can. And he serves a purpose. Good signing for Don Waddell and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Another guy on my list, Jake Evans, who we talked about on Monday. He signed a 4-year, $2.85 million per year deal with Montreal to remain in Montreal. He's also 28, same age as Matthew Olivier. Different players. So Jake Evans is a 3rd to 4th line guy, but he's very much penalty kill, high IQ player that is annoying, that can throw checks, gets in your face. I like this for Montreal. Reportedly, they had offered him a deal. And they were tough with him, going, we're not going above this. And he came to them and said, you know what, I want to stay. And could he have gotten $3.5, $4 million on the open market? Probably. But clearly he likes being a Montreal Canadian. Clearly he likes playing there. And he decides that I think he could have made more money. 29 in June. Was a 7th round pick, has only played for the Montreal Canadiens. One off his career high in goals, which was 13. 28 points, one off a career high, so he's going to have a career high season. I think it's awesome for Jake Evans. I think there's no restrictions on the trade, so there's no 10-team, nothing. You can deal him. Love that. Good job, Jeff Gorton and the crew there. Because why players that are bottom end get those, beyond me. Montreal's a point out. point out. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs? No. But with 21 games left, they are a point out. And why not try? And the thing is, they can try without selling or adding. Stay put. If you don't find something you like for David Savard, don't trade him. If it's not something that's going to change your world for dealing, player X, don't trade them. Keep them on the team. See if he can make the playoffs. Suzuki, Caulfield have all gotten better this year. All gotten better. Lane Hudson has been phenomenal. Montembeau's been solid. And they play hard as a team. And they find ways to win games every night. So, good signing, in my mind, for both sides. And if I'm unsure, I'm not adding, but I'm not subtracting either unless it really excites me. And quite frankly, if I am subtracting, I want a hockey trade. I don't want draft picks anymore. This team is kind of past that stage of just scooping up draft picks. Ottawa and Montreal have to be past that. Boston, get draft picks. You're now in that stage. You're now that team. Islanders, scoop them up. And again, they could all be crap. But they could be good too. Flyers, still get draft picks. Penguins, for God forbid, get something. Buffalo, hockey trade team. Enough with draft picks. They won't draft somebody good anyway. They'll screw it up. Also, Jordan Greenlaw, power forward for the Buffalo Sabres, signed a 2-year, $8 million extension with the team. Was a pending UFA, so he gets some job security. Less than 48 hours to the deadline. I'm curious. These are my top 3 curiosity teams. Buffalo, for sure. Ottawa, number 2. And to sprinkle it out, let's go out west. I'm going to go Calgary. Buffalo, we know, is not making the playoffs. Buffalo will be picking in the top 5. We know that. But are they going to trade a guy like Dylan Cousins, who they could get a lot for, but are you going to get a bunch of draft picks? Do you look at moving other guys? I'm not trading Tage Thompson. He's off the table. I'm not trading Darlene. Other than that, Alex Tuck could get a haul, because I love Alex Tuck. Outside of that, I'm probably good. They can go. Because clearly the team isn't that good. They're going to miss the playoffs again. 14 straight years. So I'm curious to see what's their outlook, what's their approach. Ottawa lost to Washington on Monday, but they rallied. They were down 3-0. They got a point. That was huge. You're in Chicago tonight. That's got to be 2 points. No ifs, ands, buts about it. You have to get 2 points. And guys have been banged up, but Kachuk's back. Pinto's been in the line. You got to start winning games. They're a point out. Point back of the Rangers. Ottawa, non-negotiable. Make the playoffs this year. Do they add? What do they do? I don't trust their team. fully. They're not that dangerous. What do they decide to do? Don't know. Calgary, sitting in a playoff spot right now, ahead of Vancouver, a division rival, only by 2 points, ahead of St. Louis by 3, ahead of Utah by 4. They've added Morgan Frost and they've added Joel Farabee. Now, those players aren't game changers. They aren't franchise-altering moves, but they are moves. But what do they decide to do? Fascinating. Deadline on Friday. We'll be doing a podcast on Sunday reacting to all of this because it was a busy enough couple days in the NHL. Okay. Let's pivot to the NFL. We mentioned on Monday that the Eagles cut Darius Slay, 34-year-old corner, Super Bowl champ, Pro Bowler, was an All-Pro, possibly could be a Hall of Famer one day. But it's business. They got younger players at the positions. Well, on Tuesday, they did something similar. James Bradbury, who was a Pro Bowler, they signed from the Giants. He did not play in 2024 with a torn Achilles. They cut him, saving $2.1 million, and they're moving off of 2 veterans on their roster. Because then Tuesday afternoon, the Eagles, Howie Roseman, GM to the Stars, extended running back Saquon Barkley on a 2-year, $41.2 million extension with $36 million guaranteed. Saquon had just finished year 1 of a 3-year deal, and yet he still became the highest paid running back of all time while already under contract. This story is fascinating to me for multiple reasons. Number 1, the Eagles did not have to do this. You want to reward players. Saquon Barkley, a huge reason why the Eagles won the Super Bowl this past year. No doubt about it. Nobody can argue that. But he's under contract. 2 more years. He got a good chunk of money. Nearly had the all-time record for rushing yards in a season. And yet the Eagles give him more money and another couple years of security. Why? I think the Eagles want to have a reputation as being a really player-friendly organization, as being a team that awards greatness, which Saquon Barkley is. They like having that reputation. They like being that team, I believe. Saquon was told basically to kick rocks with the Giants. They laughed at him and said, go out there and try to find somebody. Go find somebody that's willing to give you anything. And then you'll have to come back to us and accept our deal. Well, he did. And the division rival right down the road, the Eagles, signed him. And then he won a Super Bowl. And the Eagles are world champions. And now he gets more money. Eagles are legit. Eagles are a dangerous team. And They didn't have to do this, but it's incredibly astute that they did. They keep one of the most important players happy. They keep him involved with the organization. And it's great publicity around the league that if you play your ass off for us, we'll give you the bag, if you will. I love this for Saquon. He deserves to be the highest paid running back of all time. And he just seems to be a great guy. He's a great interview, really introspective. I got a lot of time for Saquon Barkley. Then, today, the Eagles gave an extension to Zach Bond, who was an all-pro at linebacker this past year, was a pending free agent come Monday. You looked around and go, Zach Bond's going to be a tough loss, losing him. Well, they gave him a 3-year, $51 million deal, 36 guaranteed. Puts him in the mix to be the highest paid linebacker in the league. So you keep him. You're keeping your offensive line. You still have Jalen Hurts. You still have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. You got everything. Despite the fact that you won a championship, your team isn't really in that much of a world of hurt, quite frankly. You're still in a prime position to be competitive, to repeat. Zach Bond was one of the guys, and you find a way to keep him. You pay Saquon Barkley more money. You lost Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator, but okay. You work your way around it. Dallas Goedert back, their tight end. They have corners that they've been the best drafting team over the last number of years with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Nakobe Dean and Jalen Carter. They have a perfect mix of veterans and younger players. They're keeping their core. Yes, you have to cut veterans, which hurts. I'm sure players in the moment go, oh, he was a great teammate, good friend. But you also know, hey, it's part of the league. We're trying to win. Again, the Commanders got Debo. They're trying to get better. CeeDee Lamb restructured his contract in Dallas. The Cowboys think it can win. LOL. Staying with the pack, staying with the mix. You'll have the 32nd pick, but the Eagles have really good scouts. They know how to draft. They could find a diamond in the rough. I trust them more than most organizations. Other news. The Jets cut Davante Adams, saving the team $30 million in cap space. He had no more guaranteed money left on his contract, so it doesn't hurt the Jets to let him go. No penalty. They traded a third-rounder for him in mid-October. He had no impact on the team, kind of like Aaron Rodgers. His tenure, no impact. Brutal trade. Made no sense at the time. He was not good with the Jets. Aaron Rodgers was not good with the Jets. You take it on the chin and you move on. Next week, the Jets, in all likelihood, will be signing a veteran quarterback to a contract. Aaron Rodgers is gone. Do they try to bring Sam Darnold back, with him likely departing Minnesota? Do they look at Kirk D. Cousins if he gets cut by the Falcons? There are options for him, for the Jets. Maybe not great options, but there are options. But they're letting the old way, the Devontae, Aaron Rodgers, that the whole mess is gone. The Vegas Raiders extended Max Crosby today on a 3-year, $106.5 million extension, $91.5 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. I love Max Crosby. I think he's one of the best players in the league, quarterbacks included. He has such an effect on the game, but he's largely played in irrelevant games since he came into the league because he's played for the Raiders. To me, this is a twofold move. They're rewarding a loyal soldier who went through multiple coaches, the Gruden era, the Pierce era, grinding through it, playing very well, never really complaining, being an all-pro, playing every game, grinding through that. And by giving him the money. But I think they've had to have conversations and they said, we're going to be better quicker than people think around the league. Outside of Max Crosby, I don't love the Raiders roster. I don't think it's that talented. I love Brock Bowers at tight end. I think he's special. He's the future of the position in the league. When Kelsey retires and when Kittle is no longer at his apex, Bowers is next, if you will. But they don't have a quarterback. They haven't had a stable running back at the position since Josh Jacobs. And even at the tail end of his time there, he kind of lost interest. So he hasn't been fantastic in a while. I think they wanted Matthew Stafford. They couldn't get him. He stayed with the Rams. Good decision, in my mind. So what do? They also cut Gardner Minshew today, who they signed 2-year, $28 million last offseason. So they move off of him. Shedeur Sanders would make a lot of sense in Vegas. But I think they need a veteran quarterback behind him. And looking at guys, Russell Wilson could make sense with Vegas with the Pete Carroll connection. Justin Fields, I don't think it's a natural fit there. Sam Darnold would be the best option because I think he's the best quarterback available of the bunch. That would make sense. But do they want to pay him that much money if they're going to draft a rookie? Unlikely. But it's interesting. Some quarterbacks, not a lot of great quarterbacks. Taylor Heineke, he's a veteran backup, but he's not a starter. So we'll see what Marcus Mariota, another guy available. We'll see what the Raiders decide to do. They're an interesting team to me. Because I think Tom Brady and the crew there think they are closer than a lot of other people do. And I don't love their roster. I love Max Crosby. I love Brock Bowers. Cutting Gardner Minshew, all great. But NFL free agency starts Monday. Love it. We'll be breaking that down next week. But also the other news in the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs traded All-Pro, Pro Bowler, guard, Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears today for a 2026 fourth-round pick. Thuney's a guard. He played tackle last year with injuries and with just a bad offensive line down the stretch in Kansas City. Obviously, he's a multiple-time Super Bowl champion. He's been phenomenal for that team since they drafted him. But he's got 1 year left on his deal. Then he'll need a new contract where the Chiefs are prioritizing Trey Smith, a guard who they franchise tagged. Creed Humphrey, their center, is also a great player. So they're going to pay those guys. It's a risk because Joe Thuney's still playing at a high. He was an All-Pro last year. Still playing at a high level, accepted different positions on that team. The Chiefs trust themselves to draft well or in free agency to find somebody. They need to. Because Thuney is not easy to replace. They need to find a guard. Maybe they'll need to trade up in the draft to find somebody they really like and scoop them up. Because this does hurt their offensive line right away with this decision. But there's only so much money, and you have to pay certain people. For the Bears, they get an all-pro offensive lineman to protect Caleb Williams. They also traded for Jonah Jackson yesterday. So, Jonah Jackson from the Rams. So they get 2 new offensive linemen in 24 hours. Their offensive line was putrid last year. They still need to draft a lineman, probably spend some money in free agency to find another guy to have depth. But I like the Bears seeing a problem. Ben Johnson said things aren't going to be the same here. Getting some players to protect their asset, and that is Caleb Williams. Number 1 overall pick. Yes, he held the ball too long, but that offensive line was also a disaster. Get him some protection. Get him some help. And finally for the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks making news today. It started with them releasing Tyler Lockett after 10 years with the team. Really good end zone receiver. Caught a lot of touchdowns. Had good connection with Russell Wilson. Had a great ability to keep his feet in bounds and just make acrobatic plays. 10 years of his career, all with Seattle. They release him today, as I think they're hoping to start fresh. Because then DK Metcalf has requested a trade, and the Seahawks are okay with that. They're willing to let his management seek a trade elsewhere. He had 600 yards last year. Lockett, 2 touchdowns. Played at K-State. Was an All-Pro in his rookie season. Already rumored that he'll go to Las Vegas, where his old coach Pete Carroll is. DK Metcalf, he's great, and he's also a pain in the ass at the same time. You never know what you're going to get with him. So talented, so powerful. I look at him and I go, what now? What's next for him? Instantly I go, the Bears would be fun. But Caleb Williams. I thought, the Raiders could use a wide receiver. You don't want to just pair former Seahawks wide receivers in Vegas, although they did have success there. The Steelers could be fun. They need another wide receiver. They need a quarterback too, but they need a wide receiver to help George Pickens if he's going to stay. There will be suitors. Seahawks are a good team. They're very much like in the middle where they might make the playoffs, they might not. They're not threatening. They play in a tough division. It's a division where I don't think any team's awesome, but no team is horrible. Arizona, competitive. Seattle, competitive. San Francisco, always game. And then the Rams, who I view as the best team in the division. But could Seattle have 8-9 wins every year with Geno Smith and the core that they have? Yeah. But they're not overly great. They're not overly threatening. Mike McDonald enters year 2 as head coach. Lockett, Metcalf, they're all Pete Carroll guys. Last year's team was quite similar. They played better on defense than in years past. But they needed a change, and I understand what they're doing in Seattle. Okay. So as I mentioned, next podcast on Sunday. Before we wrap today, UFC 313 this coming weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada. No NFL, but we got a betting segment today, courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook. Main event, you have Alex Poatan Pereira fighting against Magomed Ankalaev of Dagestan, Russia. Light heavyweight title. Alex defended his title 3 times in 2024 with 3 finishes. He's a beast. Ankalaev has lost once as a pro. He fought for the title in 2022. It ended in a majority draw with Jan Blachowicz, a fight I thought he lost. Tricky, he's currently doing Ramadan and trying to cut weight at the same time. I always talk, Alex sucks on the ground. Magomed's going to wrestle with him. Magomed's never been a huge wrestler. His last fight with Rakic, it was a striking contest for 15 minutes. Should he strike with Alex for 25? Hell no. Because I don't think he's going to win the fight. Very close odds. Alex Pereira minus 122. Magomed Ankalaev minus 104. Alex's star is rising so high. He's such a huge star in the sport right now. I'm going to go Alex to win the fight. And even though I think Ankalaev is such a tough test and has many ways that he can beat Alex and take his title, I would take Pereira minus 122 as the favorite in this fight. It's a great main event. It's a tough style matchup. I love all of it. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of fun, this matchup in particular. I love everything about it. Okay. Co-main event. Justin Gaethje fighting Rafael Fiziev. These two met in February of 2023. Gaethje winning by a very slim margin in London, England. Some thought Fiziev won the fight. I thought Gaethje won it, but was an awesome fight. He was supposed to fight Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker broke his hand, had to pull out. Fiziev steps in on 10 days' notice. He hasn't fought in a year and a half because he tore his ACL. And yet Rafael Fiziev is a minus 162 favorite going into Saturday night. Gaethje, yes, he hasn't fought since last April, where he was knocked out in epic fashion against Max Holloway. But he took the necessary time off. He's had wars with Dustin Poirier. He's come off losses where he's gotten knocked out before, came back strong. 36, but still has tread left on those tires. Still has a great chin, in my opinion. I'm stunned that you can get Justin Gaethje at a plus number. For 15 minutes, this is going to be a lot of fun because for 15 minutes 2 years ago, it was. Huge opportunity for Fiziev to rise the rankings and to get a victory over a legend in Gaethje. If you're going to tune into this event for one fight, it's this one. It will deliver, I promise you. But I like Justin Gaethje to win the fight, to bounce back. You can get him at a plus number. I am taking him. Justin Gaethje to win against Rafael Fiziev. Third fight of the main card, Jalen Turner, the Tarantula, fighting Ignacio Batmundez. Turner hasn't fought in a hot minute. He is a guy that I don't know how he fights at 155 pounds. He's 6'3", skinny as can be. Only 29. He's been in the game a while. If you look in 2024, he fought Moicano at UFC 300. So he hasn't fought since last April either. Got knocked out. He lost to Dan Hooker in a close fight in 2023. Lost to Gamrot. Fight I thought he won. Defeated Bobby Green. So he's had some mixed results. Ignacio's 27. Good fighter. Knocked out Manuel Torres at the Sphere card. But this is his toughest opponent. Jalen Turner's ranked. Jalen Turner's very good. But Mundez is a minus 132. Jalen Turner plus 104. This is another close one. Two really talented guys. Two guys that are very big for the lightweight weight class. I like Jalen Turner to come back. I like the guys who lost at 300 to win on Saturday at UFC 313. Give me Jalen Turner plus 104 to pull off the upset. Amanda Lemos, Yasmin Lucendo. Lucendo's great. Lemos is tough. She probably won't be finished because she never is. She's a tough woman. Lucendo's on the rise. She's younger. She's incredibly skilled. I like her to win. Bobby Green, a.k.a. King Green, fighting Mauricio Ruffi of Brazil. He's also part of this Fighting Nerds team that has taken shape with Gene Silva, with a bunch of guys around MMA that are all high-quality fighters. King Green is an interesting character. He's been to jail. He's been in the game. He's 32, 16, and 1. 38 years old. Fought twice last year, beat Jim Miller at 300, then lost to Paddy Pimblett in July. Got knocked out brutally against Jalen Turner. He beat Grant Dawson, beat Tony Ferguson. So he's had a good run. Mauricio Ruffi is 11-1 in his career. Beat Jamie Malarkey last year. Beat James Lontop. Hasn't lost in the UFC, 28 years old. One thing I do know about him, he does not have a great gas tank. He's a minus 520 heavy favorite. Guys with huge records haven't done well this year. Undefeated guys have a losing record so far in 2025. Now he's got one loss. I would take Ruffy, but the shot in the dark's Bobby King Green, because Bobby can catch you on the chin and put you to sleep if you are not careful. Also, Curtis Blades fighting Risan Kuniev. Kuniev he fought in the Contender Series, making his UFC debut. Curtis Blades fought for the title not long. Curtis Blades has so many different ways he can beat you. I love Curtis Blades in this fight. Joshua Van Ray Tesura, great fight. This is on the prelims. I love flyweights, 125-pound division. I like Josh Van minus 200. The kid's on the rise. He's dangerous in this division. Incredibly talented. It's a pretty solid card. It's not Miami, but it's hard to be better than that Miami card next month. We will recap this next week. Sunday, we will react to the NHL trade deadline. Monday, we'll have a show starting to react to the NFL free agency. So lots of content coming over the next little while. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Sunday. I'm your host, Noah Warren, and this is the Live and Learn podcast.